Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Terror has struck at the heart of New York City, as it now does with disturbing frequency. An ISIS-inspired suspect detonated a bomb in a crowded subway passage right in the middle of morning rush hour. The explosion sent commuters fleeing. Thankfully, only a few people were hurt, most severely the bomber himself. That man has been identified as Aqayed Ullah. He's a 27-year-old Bangladeshi immigrant who came to this country in 2011 through a chain migration visa. Fox senior correspondent Rick Leventhal joins us from New York City with more. Rick.
And Tucker, the investigation aggressively underway. A law enforcement source tells me they don't believe the suspect had any co-conspirators. So in other words, they believe that he did, in fact, act alone. They say that he made the device at work. He told them, authorities, that he made the device at work. He was employed by an electrical company. And I'm told that he had extensive travel overseas since arriving here in the U.S. in February 2011. Aqayed Ullah, 27, lived in Brooklyn, but from Bangladesh. The Department of Homeland Security confirming that he arrived here on an F-43 family immigrant visa. He was a lawful permanent resident, as you mentioned, benefiting from the extended family chain migration. There are questions about whether he was inspired by ISIS. He told investigators apparently that his attack was revenge for U.S. attacks overseas. But if his goal was to inflict damage and death, Tucker, he failed miserably. Authorities say Ullah had a low-tech pipe bomb strapped to his body with Velcro and zip ties, and when he detonated it in an underground passageway between the Port Authority and Times Square, the bomber was the only one seriously injured, with lacerations and burns to his hands and abdomen. 3 other people were hurt, complaining of headaches and ringing ears, but not serious injuries at this point. The Port Authority police were first on scene to contain the suspect, but there was a massive response by the NYPD, MTA, state police, and the FBI, now investigating the suspect's home, his family's home, his social media accounts, and any devices he might have been connected to or had access to for any clues to his inspiration and possible accomplices. So Tucker, clearly this city was lucky. More people could have been hurt, and clearly, Tucker, New York City remains a top target for terrorists.
Apparently so. Rick Leventhal, thank you for that. So what type of bomb was the attacker using, and what could we do to block attacks like this in the future, if anything? Those questions for our next 2 guests. Waleed Faris is an expert on terrors in the Middle East and has been for a long time. Johnny Joey Jones served as a bomb disposal expert in the Marine Corps in both Iraq and Afghanistan. They both join us tonight. First to you, Waleed, the question we always ask: how do we prevent attacks like this in the future?
I am not concerned about the investigation. They're going to get us a lot of information about himself, his network, where he's coming from. I am concerned about the fact that we were not able to detect him and therefore vetting him before. The real battle is going to be the vetting system.
But with the scale of our immigration into this country, how could you possibly vet all those people?
Well, you have a problem of immigration that we need to respond to, regardless of terrorism. And then you have a problem of terrorism, the jihadists connecting to these holes and loopholes inside the immigration system. So we need to be smart, making sure that we have a government ability to detect on the one hand and disconnect that threat from the windows they're using to get to the United States.
Johnny, this attack seems like it could have been far worse. Why wasn't it?
Well, yes, it absolutely could have been far worse because he made it to that place with a bomb on his body. More than likely, there are 2 scenarios here on why this didn't work well. Either he attempted to make a high explosive like ammonium nitrate or TATP or some of the things you've heard of and failed in the chemistry, the actual mixture of the component, in which when he went to detonate it, the little blasting cap went off, but the actual high explosive didn't. Or he did what I believe to be more common option. He tried to use a lower explosive like black powder, almost like gunpowder. And when you do that, the container you put it in has to stay contained. That's why they use pressure cookers and threaded pipe. It has to stay contained and allow for enough time for that low order, that low explosive to actually turn into an explosive or to actually explode. When that happens, if you don't do it right, if that container has any weak spots, he'll do what's called venting, where it actually just sucks in oxygen and starts to burn instead of explode. I think more than likely, with the very little information, which is the video, the picture, and what we hear, more than likely it probably was a low explosive like black powder. A lot easier. You can buy it off the shelf. There's no chemistry involved.
Well, that's the thing.
This guy seems to have acted alone.
He apparently told investigators from his hospital bed this afternoon that he got the instructions for this bomb on the internet. Is that plausible?
Absolutely. So you got to think of 2 things when it comes to making a bomb. the thing that goes boom is your main charge. That's a chemical that you have to make or acquire. And then the apparatus, the whatever it is, anything in Walmart that turns a light bulb on or makes a noise can be used to trigger a bomb. Any battery can be used to set it off. So, you know, there are two things you make here. One is an electronic circuit that sets it off. The other is the actual explosion that explodes. Usually both are homemade in Afghanistan or Iraq, and usually both have opportunities to go wrong. I can tell you I'm sitting here today alive because dozens of them just weren't made right.
Well, that's good news for you and for commuters this morning. Waleed, the thing maybe that's most troublesome about this is that this guy was basically succeeding in the United States. He came over, he had a hack license, a license to drive professionally in New York City. He was working for an electrical contractor, apparently, been here for a while, and yet he tried to detonate a suicide bomb this morning. How do you get from one to the other?
That's a great point, Tucker. Basically, number one, what has happened now and will be happening is that an unsuccessful operation will do what? It would teach the next wave of jihadists. What we discussed right now, we are telling the other side that to have a successful bomb, you need to do it in a better way. But that's the system of democracy. Why he actually came here, basically, what we don't know, was he already indoctrinated overseas? Where did the indoctrination happen? That's my real concern.
But what's terrifying is he wasn't an outcast. I mean, he was doing what immigrants are supposed to do. He had a house. He was here living with his family. He had a series of jobs. I mean, he doesn't... That's
your response, guess to whom? To the previous 8 years of the Obama administration, where we were told, oh, they don't have a job, they are frustrated, only the bad guys. Well, that's a successful guy. That's exactly the point you're making right now.
Which is terrifying.
Which is terrifying because they could use success if they are indoctrinated.
Scary. Waleed, Johnny, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Islamic terror isn't just menacing New York City, of course. It's an even greater problem in Europe, where decades of slow immigration have accelerated to become a wave of migrants that has completely changed the demographic mix of that continent, not to mention the daily lives of the people who live there. Pull up your mental image of Sweden. Pacifism, socialism, blonde people, mandatory politeness, lilting accents, saunas, you know the cliche. If that's what you're picturing, you haven't been there recently. Here's the scene in Malmö, that's the country's third largest city, just the other day. It may look like Karachi or Cairo, but again, that is Sweden. It's changed quite a bit. A generation ago, you would have been hard-pressed to find Swedes marching in support of religiously motivated mass murder. Now, it's all but normal, thanks to mass immigration that has brought tens of thousands of immigrants into that country from North Africa and the Middle East. Malmö has been called Europe's most anti-Semitic city, with dozens of verbal and physical attacks targeting the few hundred Jews who still live there. Just 75 years ago, Sweden was a haven for Jews fleeing the Holocaust. Today, those same Jews fear their own neighbors again, thanks to the Swedish government's decision to bring in a population that hates them. Just 2 days ago, a synagogue in Sweden was firebombed. It wasn't the first such attack, and unfortunately, it will likely not be the last. Meanwhile, in Paris, Muslim immigrants have taken over the city streets in some parts of the capital. Residents of one neighborhood are threatening a hunger strike if camping migrants aren't moved by the end of the year. They say trash is everywhere, and worse, women are being harassed regularly on the street. Mark Stein is an author and columnist who's followed what's happening in Europe for some time, and he joins us tonight. So, Mark, you see videos like that from Sweden, and you realize that this is not the continent that you picture, that it really is completely different because of immigration trends. Are the authorities in Europe, I know you spent a lot of time over there, aware of this? Do they care? Is there a public conversation about this?
Well, Tony Blair was asked by the late Christopher Hitchens about my book and whether the demographic trends in Europe were part of what he called the public conversation, the European conversation with his fellow prime ministers. And Tony Blair gave a very revealing answer, I thought. He said it's part of the subterranean conversation.
Right, exactly.
In other words, Europe's leaders haven't figured out a way to talk about this in public. I know Malmö very well. I've been there once or twice a year for the last 15 years. And the reason I go to Malmo is because it was the first Christian city in what was then Denmark, and it's now going to be the first Muslim city in Sweden. And I do something that I first did at the suggestion of a couple of those Swedish blondes you were mentioning, the ABBA girls, Britt Eklund, those kind of girls that you were talking about earlier, that they made one evening to me as I was sitting in a coffee shop, and at twilight I walked from downtown Malmo to Rosengård, which is the big Muslim suburb, and the Swedish blondes thin out and the covered women and the bearded men come towards you, until eventually you're in a part of Sweden in which there are no uncovered women, and in which Muslim women who've come from Muslim countries where they didn't have to go covered, such as Bosnia, suddenly find they have to go covered when they emigrate to Sweden. That walk, as the blondes thin out and the big bearded men come towards you in ever greater numbers, that is Europe's future walking towards you. And I would say it's the biggest story of our time.
Yes.
That Christendom is being transformed at an extraordinary level, to the point where Swedes will be an ethnic minority in their own country by mid-century. That's
what I don't understand. Why is no one allowed to talk about it? I mean, if Swedes or Danes or Finns were flooding into Jordan and displacing the native population and forcing people to follow their Christian practices and obey their cultural imperatives, their mores, I think liberals here would say, well, no, you can't do that. It's their country.
Right.
Why is it
Right.
different when it happens in Europe or the United States?
Well, you actually see it in the United States when they talk about New Orleans no longer being a chocolate city because too many white people have moved in. If you remember, that was one of the headlines a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that the problem, of course, is that the minute you raise it, you get accused of being racist. The minute you talk about it with any degree of honesty, that deputy leader of Britain First that you mentioned a couple of days ago, the police in Belfast flew all the way to London to arrest her, put her on a plane, take her back to Belfast for something she said in a speech at Belfast City Hall. Swedes are particularly dishonest about it. The wealthy Swedes, the minute their area gets like those scenes you were showing in Paris, where there's too many migrants and the neighborhood starts to change, they move out to all white suburbs and all white villages, and the moment they're there, they vote ever more enthusiastically in polls about how wonderful multiculturalism
But
is.
if
in
you
other
were
words, the more they move away from it, the more they are in favor of it.
Of course, because it doesn't affect them. But if you intentionally set out to create an environment in which violent nationalism would flower, wouldn't this be it?
Absolutely. I mean, the first duty of the political class is prudence. And you don't extinguish prudence for utopian delusions. And the reality is that people, as people know in almost any part of the world, that the minute you have Islam as 15 to 20% of your population, the mediation of relations between Islam and the rest of society becomes your principal domestic consideration, as is happening in front of our eyes in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, in the United Kingdom.
And it will happen here. The first duty of the political class is prudence. I'm getting that tattoo.
Absolutely.
And I'm giving you credit when I get it. Mark Stein, it's great to see you.
That's a great tramp stamp to get. I recommend that, Tucker.
It's true. Thank you.
Nice.
CNN, ABC, The Washington Post all went above and beyond in an effort to win the president's fake news contest. Who won? We'll tell you next. A couple of weeks ago, President Trump made the following pretty amusing proposal on Twitter. Quote, "We should have a contest as to which of the networks, plus CNN, not including Fox, is the most dishonest, corrupt, and or distorted in its political coverage of your favorite president, parenthesis, me. They are all bad. Winner to receive fake news trophy, exclamation point." It seemed like a joke then, but apparently the other networks took it very seriously and started working to win. CNN hyped a WikiLeaks bombshell that went absolutely nowhere. ABC had to suspend Brian Ross after he falsely claimed evidence of pre-election collusion between Trump and Russia. Even old Dave Weigel of the Washington Post, who now has a mustache, got involved. Used a misleading photo to suggest Trump's rally in Pensacola was empty rather than packed. It was quite a week for the press, but instead of pausing for self-reflection, David Frum of The Atlantic said these bungled stories proved the importance of trusting the media.
The mistakes are precisely the reason that people should trust the media. Look, astronomers make mistakes all the time because science is a process of discovery of truth. Astrologers never make mistakes, or at least they never own up to them, because what they're offering is a closed system of ideology and propaganda.
So the mistakes are the reason you want to trust the accuracy. Is it brilliantly counterintuitive or just stupid? That's the question. Joe Concha writes about media for The Hill. Molly Hemingway is a senior editor at The Federalist, and they both join us tonight. Molly, first to you. I don't begrudge anybody the right to make a mistake once in a while. I've made a ton of them, for sure. I just can't help but notice that all the mistakes that the different channels are making are in the same direction. All the mistakes seem to be kind of solidifying liberal views on things.
Right, and just in this last week alone, you mentioned a few of the stories, but you didn't even get all of the stories.
No,
there were mistakes.
Can't keep track.
Was, a false report about Deutsche Bank subpoenaing
right.
Trump financial accounts, and there's many. And the New York Times said that KT McFarland had admitted collusion. She did not admit collusion. All these stories go in the same way. So if they want us to believe that these errors are just routine and they are just some things that happen occasionally, why are they all going in the same direction? If they truly were just accidents or things that happen as part of the job, you would expect to see errors go in different directions, errors that make Trump look good as well as bad. Or you would have expected to have seen the same level of erroneous reporting on Barack Obama. We did not see that.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that at all. So, Joe, again, people make mistakes, but if you're consistently wrong, and if you're way out over your skis making predictions that don't match reality, in any other business, you would be demoted or at least asked to take some time off. You'd be fired from the military. No one ever gets fired in the media except for groping others at Christmas parties. Have you noticed that?
Well, Brian Ross did get a 4-week suspension, so let's be clear about that. In the CNN case, there were no suspensions or reprimands in that particular instance. I keep hearing, and I saw this during the press briefing today, that reporters are saying, look, we just made mistakes. We're just trying to get to the truth. The problem is there is a rush to get to that every time. And the CNN example is perfect with the WikiLeaks story because, remember, the network went ahead with information that was read to them. And then the Washington Post did the right thing. They actually got the document that showed that the information was false. In essence, that Donald Trump Jr. and Trump associates received that information 10 days later. In other words, they took a little more effort and took a little more time and actually got the document. Now, and one more point, by the way, in terms of we hear about unnamed sources, right? These aren't innocent whistleblowers. These are political operatives, or they may even be lawmakers themselves. And they realize now they could weaponize false information because you have reporters that are like that Jim Comey analogy I used earlier in the year, seagulls at the beach that will eat anything and gobble it up regardless of the quality or even know what they're eating. And let me give you one more stat. Jim Sciutto, who is a foreign affairs correspondent for CNN, he pushed out this story, like everybody does when their network gets a big exclusive. And that got 2,300 retweets and 3,300 likes on Twitter. He then sends out the correction saying, no, we got it wrong, and this is what the story actually says. You know how many retweets that got? 52. And only 148 likes. I'm not very good at math, but I believe that's about 2%. So that's the thing. Even when the correction's done, the allegation always trumps the exoneration.
So, Molly, the substance of these stories, maybe not that's ridiculous Russia story or how many people went to some Trump rally. Like, in the end, who cares? But what if, if we were in a war or there were like an actual crisis in this country and nobody trusted media outlets? What would that do to our society?
It's a very dangerous thing to not be able to trust a media outlet or have a general confidence that the media will get a story right. But I actually think the substance is key here. What we've seen for the last year is an obsession with a story about treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election. The substance of that is so important. It has undermined a legitimately elected president, and it has been something that the media have been hammering on day after day. I mean, multiple stories a day.
Yes.
What if the real scandal is that that itself was an information operation, and that it was weaponized and it was distributed through the media, and our media people either willingly fell for it or unwittingly fell for it. Either of those scenarios is extremely dangerous, and it doesn't feel like we have a media complex capable of really digging into the significance of that story.
Right, because they're incapable of self-reflection, and I actually am starting to think that's exactly what it was. Wish we had more time. Molly, Joe, thank you both.
Thank you.
It's been a turbulent contest, to put it mildly, but Alabama's Senate race finally ends tomorrow. Democrats are making the contest all about race, weirdly. One African-American Jones voter disagrees with that. He's from Birmingham, Alabama. He's here to explain what's going on next.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Caroline Shively. A pipe bomb attack shaking the heart of New York City. The suspect, inspired by ISIS, set off the crude device in a crowded subway passageway at the height of the morning rush hour. Authorities say the short pipe was packed with explosive powder, but failed to turn the pipe into shrapnel. The suspect, 27-year-old Akayed Allah, who's originally from Bangladesh, was the only one who suffered serious injuries. A massive wildfire burning the foothill towns near Santa Barbara, exploding in size. It's now the 5th largest in state history. The flames forcing tens of thousands of people from their homes. More than 750 buildings have been destroyed. But the strong Santa Ana winds have started to die down a bit, allowing firefighters to get the upper hand on other fires in Southern California. I'm Caroline Shively. Now back to Tucker Carlson Tonight.
We're just a day away from what seems like the longest political contest in human history, the Alabama special Senate election race. Democratic Senate candidate Doug Jones facing blowback tonight over mailers his campaign sent out last week. Those flyers showed an image of an incredulous black man and asked, quote, if a black man went after high school girls, anyone would try to make him a senator? Eric Guster is a lawyer from Alabama. He is a Doug Jones supporter, voted for him. An absentee ballot. He joins us tonight. So, Eric, it seems to me there are a lot of reasons that Democrats might want to vote against Roy Moore. But why these flyers telling black voters he's a racist? Why not go after him on the issues?
Actually, Doug Jones has gone against Roy Moore on the issues, such as Roy Moore's his civil rights history and some of the things such as he wanted to keep segregational language in the Constitution. Those are the issues that Doug Jones has brought out. And the flyer, I did not like that flyer, but he has promoted his campaign and he has marketed to African-American communities as well as other Democratic bases to get them out to vote.
But what I find, I guess, insulting about this, and I'm not African-American nor a Democrat, so I'm sort of watching from the outside, but it seems insulting, kind of, that, I mean, if someone tried to get my vote by making it all about, you know, someone is against white people or whatever, I'd say, okay, but, like, where is he on tax rates? Do you know what I mean? It seems like this is a very tired way to campaign. You see it a lot. Why do it in this race?
Oh, God, everybody's doing it. Luther Strange, when Luther Strange got beat down by Roy Moore, Luther Strange was one of the most race-baiting campaigns I've ever seen. Roy Moore has done it in a way in which he talks about immigration and building a wall, and he has all these brown people on camera to say we don't like them. That is what his campaign is based upon.
Luther Strange, Luther Strange not running for anything now, but Luther Strange ran a racist campaign against Roy Moore in the primary that doesn't even make sense given the demographics of Alabama. I don't even know what you're talking about, but it kind of is.
And that's what he did. It didn't make sense. That's the beauty of it, because he was trying to create racially charged. He was trying to create their campaign to make a racially charged, and that's what he did, and he got whipped. However, now we have Roy Moore who is doing something similar. Well.
But I mean, look, here's the point. I mean, nobody.
I'm trying to educate you about it.
There are a lot of reasons that you might be against Roy Moore. I think you could take these accusers seriously. You might not like his position on X, Y, or Z. But he's not trying to bring segregation back to Alabama, and you'd have to be dumb to think that he is. I mean, let's just be honest.
First of all, hold on, Tucker. I did not say that.
I don't think you said that. No, you didn't say that. But the Jones campaign is saying that.
I didn't say that.
I didn't think you did. That. The Jones campaign is saying that.
I'm making sure.
Absolutely.
Right. No, Jones is not saying he wanted to bring back segregation. That is not what he said. Doug Jones is bringing out the fact that Roy Moore wanted to keep segregational language in our Alabama Constitution. That is a major issue for so many people, including blacks and whites, because we wanted to get rid of that language, and Roy Moore supported it.
Okay, but no one is trying to bring back I mean, that's a debate about language, but its real-life implications are pretty much zero. Nobody's trying to bring segregation back to the state of Alabama. No one in this race, anyway. No non-crazy person is trying to do that. And so it's not really about that. This is about trying to scare people, and it doesn't seem like it's necessary, and it leads to lasting wounds that don't go away. So why do that? And why do it in every single race?
I don't know why Roy Moore is trying to scare people into voting for him. I don't know why Roy Moore is trying to scare people into voting for him, because that's what his ads are portraying. They're trying to scare people about immigrants, trying to make the people who need immigration, the immigration boogeyman. But both sides have gone a little far with their mailers and with their ads. I do say that, but I did support Jones.
Here's the difference. You should be afraid of our immigration policy because of what happened this morning in New York, what happened last week in Sweden. I mean, it's not a racial question. You can be terrified of our immigration policy and not be a racist.
Why are you saying we should be terrified about it?
Because we're not vetting people we're letting in here. And it's making the country poorer and more dangerous. It's not a race attack. It's a statement of fact.
No, it's not.
And you're
that's
not a bigot for saying
that. Tucker.
Well, it is true.
Tucker, that's not true. No, it's not. I appreciate you saying that, but it's not true.
You appreciate me saying that. Eric Guster, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Richard Goodstein advised both of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaigns, and he joins us now. So this, I guess what bugs me, and I'm not taking up the cudgel on behalf of Roy Moore. I'm just pointing out that, like, you don't need to do this. You could run a series of ads against Roy Moore about him being impeached as a judge or about the accusations currently against him. You don't have to pretend that he's some kind of Klansman or George Wallace replica, because he's not. Why are they doing this?
Well, I mean, ask Richard Shelby why he said not only could he not vote for Roy Moore, but he didn't think other people should, and he didn't think Roy Moore represented what Alabama should. I mean, and he's not talking about race. I mean, look, Doug Jones
You're making my point for me.
Oh, okay,
Why doesn't Doug Jones do that?
Doug Jones said that the mailer speaks for itself, but it's in an odd way, Roy Moore's the one who introduced race by talking about how when America was great again is when there was slavery, because families were together. Roy Moore's the one who said we should abolish all the amendments after the 10th, which would mean no 13th, no abolition of slavery, no 15th, no right to vote, dependent on race, no 19th Amendment because of giving women the right to vote, et cetera, et cetera. So if anybody is kind of putting race in, it's Roy Moore. And nobody's suggesting we go back to these things.
No, okay, and that's kind of the point.
Right.
Look, you can agree or disagree with Moore on a whole bunch of things, but to compare him to George Wallace or to suggest, as this flyer does, that he wants to bring segregation back, he hasn't suggested. There's no evidence he wants that. And whenever you say something like that, it makes people more afraid. It divides the country in ways that are permanent. I don't know why Democrats persist in campaigning that way every single campaign.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is I don't think a statement in 2011 about doing away with every amendment past the 10th. Okay, this was not ancient history. This was a relatively recent comment.
Wouldn't it just be easier to ask Roy Moore? Look, are you for limiting people's rights?
Roy Moore's lying about these women. What do you say? Ask him. Roy Moore can't, kind of level with people about what he did with these women.
But on a policy question, it's really simple. And I've never understood why people persist in assuming what others think when you could just ask. Roy Moore, whatever you think of him, is pretty upfront about what he thinks. Maybe you don't agree, you believe him on the women. I get it.
Right.
But on his beliefs, he's willing to say the most unfashionable things. Why doesn't someone say, hey, Roy Moore, should everyone over 18 be allowed to vote without a felony record? I think he'd probably say yes.
Yeah. And all I'm saying is Richard Shelby, the other senator, has as much at stake in who that other position is going to be as anybody, including Donald Trump. And even he couldn't bring himself to vote for Roy Moore. And whether it's about race or not.
My point is not that every decent person has to vote for Roy Moore. I don't think that, actually. Yeah. I'm just saying that in campaign after campaign after campaign, Democrats have only one pitch to African-American voters, and that is the other side hates you because of your race.
Yeah.
And I just think over time that divides the country. I think in a lot of cases it's totally untrue. It's the sleaziest way to campaign. Why keep doing it?
Could you blame a black voter for looking at Roy Moore's record, looking at the fact that Roy Moore wouldn't dare step foot in a black community to campaign? He's not even in the state to campaign. The fact that Roy Moore can't bring himself to speak to black voters and that he takes these positions that are so antithetical to the interests of black voters, saying slavery was the time we want to make America great.
He didn't say slavery was. Look, I'm not going to get me in a position where I'm defending everything Roy Moore said. I'm just saying he didn't actually endorse slavery. Let's just.
Of course, I'm not saying he did.
Why not attack his views on, I don't know, tax rates or something real?
But the question was, when was America great again? And what does he go to? He goes to the time of slavery. So again, it's not Doug Jones.
Do you think Roy Moore's for slavery?
I think Roy Moore has this fantasized view that, yes, that's when America was at its best. And yeah, we had slavery. No, we had slavery, but in his addled view, families were close, which is hideous, right?
But do you think Roy Moore's for slavery? You don't think he's for slavery. You don't have any evidence he's a racist.
I'm looking at what Roy Moore said.
But why? No, but let's just be real for a sec. Do you have evidence he's a racist? You don't. He's never said anything that's racist. He said a lot of things that people may disagree with, but why call him a racist too? That's all I'm asking.
I think people of color find it deeply offensive when he says, when we had America great again was at a time of slavery. So is that racist? Yeah, fundamentally.
Do you think black voters at all feel patronized by white liberals who are the only pitch they ever make is that the other side is racist? Don't you think some black voters say, well, why don't you just treat me like a normal person and like tell me about how you're going to make the schools better or make the roads better or lower my taxes or some normal issue? Do you ever think that they feel patronized by that?
Yeah, actually, I don't think that's the message. It's about health care. It's about jobs. It's about pay. It's about income equality. That's the message.
Those are real. Those are real issues. And those are real messages. I never hear them, but maybe they're out there.
Well, I think they are, but we'll, time will tell.
Richard, thank you.
Thank you.
After years of calling
America's
the whole story a sham, Planned Parenthood is now facing a federal investigation by the Department of Justice for selling parts, which they appear to have been doing. The allegations against the group first surfaced when the Center for Medical Progress, that's an anti-abortion organization, published footage of Planned Parenthood employees discussing the trade in fetal body parts, and it was nauseating. This is the first time I've ever heard of this story. It could be because the rest of the press is not interested in covering it, so they don't. We spoke to David Daleiden, who leads the Center for Medical Progress, on this subject. David, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Tucker, great to be on.
What exactly is the DOJ looking into? What are the allegations?
Sure. So the DOJ is just doing their job and doing exactly what they should be doing, which is following up on two very good, comprehensive investigations that were done by the Senate Judiciary Committee and by the House Select Investigative Panel into Planned Parenthood's participation in the harvesting and sale of aborted baby body parts with multiple for-profit companies that they were engaged with for about 5 years and sometimes even longer.
So Planned Parenthood was involved in the sale of human parts. That's illegal. We've known this for a long time, and yet, as far as I know, the only people to face legal consequences so far have been members of your group, which brought this to light. Is that correct?
So far, Planned Parenthood's political allies in California have brought a series of totally bogus charges against myself and one of my investigative colleagues. Those are being litigated in California right now. But now Planned Parenthood is going to have to face the wheels of justice themselves because the Justice Department is doing their job. They're following up on some very damning evidence, both documents and other kinds of evidence that was uncovered by the congressional investigations. And Planned Parenthood is going to have to answer very serious questions about why their medical directors are in those documents endorsing advertisements from companies like STEM Express promising a financial profit to abortion clinics when they provide body parts, why they're signing contracts that value Planned Parenthood's abortion body parts inventory at up to the millions of dollars. There's lots of very damning and incriminating evidence in those documents that now the Department of Justice is going to have access to, and Planned Parenthood is going to have to face the consequences for that under the law.
I mean, presumably you could be for Roe v. Wade and still horrified by the idea of selling baby parts. Has any prominent Democrat denounced this that you've seen?
I think that the pro-life Democrats that are out there need to speak out pretty loudly now, and those who are pro-choice and who support abortion rights need to speak out and differentiate themselves from Planned Parenthood, from the radical abortion extremists there who think that that pro-choice means any abortion, anytime, anywhere, up to 9 months, selling the body parts afterwards, using partial birth abortions to get intact, saleable body parts. Right. That's the face of Planned Parenthood today. That's funded by taxpayers of up to $500 million every year, and that needs to stop.
Committing abortion for sex selection, which they explicitly allow at their clinics. So, but I guess the question is, has any prominent Democrat denounced this? Any?
You would have to ask them. You know, I just saw my own Senator Dianne Feinstein from the state of California just issued a statement today in support of Planned Parenthood, even in the face of them facing an investigation, a federal investigation from the Department of Justice now for their years-long scheme with companies like STEM Express and Advanced Bioscience Resources and Novogenics Laboratories to harvest and sell tiny baby hearts, lungs, livers, and brains from their late-term abortions. So unfortunately, the most prominent people who are in Planned Parenthood's corner still seem to be with them, and it's really a problem because the evidence is not going to be able to be kept under wraps and to be kept covered up forever. Planned Parenthood's allies in high places like Judge Orrick, who's the federal judge in San Francisco overseeing their lawsuits over to me, he has a long history of affiliation with Planned Parenthood. He helped open and run and fund a Planned Parenthood clinic in San Francisco that's now part of the affiliate that's suing me in his courtroom. He needs to recuse himself. He still hasn't done that. And he's the one that's trying to keep the remaining videotapes under wrap, which are now going to be all the more relevant in light of the federal DOJ investigation.
50 years from now, his ancestors will be ashamed, and so will Dianne Feinstein's, of what they're doing right now. And I appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
David, thank you. U.S. tech companies are more powerful than any corporations in human history. What's the right way to rein them in, if indeed they should be reined in at all? The chairman of the SEC joins us next. You think of the FCC as kind of an obscure federal body. Not anymore. It's under attack now for its plans to repeal an Obama-era regulation known as net neutrality. A lot of people, a lot of famous people, have very strong opinions about net neutrality. They warn if it's repealed, a handful of tech companies will have total control over the internet. Wait, doesn't that already describe the status quo? Ajay Pai is the chairman of the FCC. He's been the center of a lot of criticism recently, and he joins us tonight. Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
So here's, and I actually don't know what I think of this, but here's the line that if net neutrality is rolled back, that a handful of companies will be able to control content. And if they don't like what they're seeing or you're broadcasting, they can shut it down. Should we be worried about that?
No, I think what net neutrality repeal would actually mean is that we once again have a free and open internet. The government will not be regulating how internet service providers, how anyone else in the internet economy manages their networks. And so I think we had that free market approach for 20 years, starting in President Clinton's time,
right,
1996, all the way through 2015. The internet wasn't broken when the Obama FCC decided to try to fix it. And we've seen the effects of these regulations over the last 2 years. It's made for worse infrastructure investment, less innovation, and I think that's part of the reason why these regulations need to go.
But I guess what's changed is we're in the middle of the biggest witch hunt in American history, and corporations are complicit in that. So what would happen if this is repealed and the Southern Poverty Law Center says, you know, I saw Fox News the other night, that's hate speech, internet service provider shut them down. What would prevent the service provider from doing that?
Well, one thing is that the FCC requires transparency. If any ISP engaged in that kind of conduct, they would have to disclose it. Additionally, the Federal Trade Commission would have jurisdiction over it. But I think you've actually put your finger on something that's very important that I've talked about. Where is the real threat to the free and open internet? And one of the things that people have suggested is it's not internet service providers, it's some of the content companies that decide what you see on the internet and, more importantly, what you don't see. Where's the transparency there? Shouldn't we have a conversation that involves them as well?
Why don't we? So you have two companies, Google and Facebook, that control 90% of all digital ad dollars. That means they basically control all news on the internet. Nobody ever says anything about it. Nobody appears worried by it. Why is that?
I'm not sure why, but you do see rumblings on Capitol Hill. Members of both parties in both houses are a little bit worried about what's going on the internet in terms of transparency and how some of these decisions are being made. And I, too, have raised some of these concerns. When Twitter, for example, restricted Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn's YouTube video announcing her run for the Senate, in part because of her pro-life views. And same thing with YouTube demonetizing Diamond and Silk, some Trump supporters, and Dennis Prager's videos. I mean, a lot of these decisions impinge on the free expression online that we've all come to cherish, but there's no real transparency into how these decisions are being made.
And there's never any outcry, whereas there is with net neutrality. And again, I'm not even sure what I think of it, but it does seem like someone's spending a lot of money to lobby public opinion on this subject, the opinions of famous people. Is it the big tech companies lobbying against?
I'm not sure who exactly is funding all of these things, but what I can say is that the hysteria has reached a pitch which is completely disproportionate to the facts. I mean, as I said, we weren't living in a broken internet in 2015. All of these harms that these celebrities and whatnot are talking about are all hypothetical. There's no market failure here. Internet service providers are not and have not blocked content willy-nilly. And we're confident going forward that given the robust rules that we have and that the Federal Trade Commission has, they won't going forward as well.
But we know Facebook, Google, and Twitter have blocked content willy-nilly and continue to, and nobody does anything about it. Mr. Pai, thank you for coming on. Great to see you.
Good to see you too.
We'll be back in just a minute.